Laura said, I am filling in for her today since her voice has disappeared a bit. So I want to start today with a statement that I believe is true in every business, every relationship, every team, and honestly, every part of life. Most problems are not people problems, they're communication problems. Think about that. How many frustrations, how many delays, how many misunderstandings started because something wasn't clearly said? Someone assumed instead of asking. Expectations weren't aligned, or communication simply stopped. The reason this matters so much is because communication doesn't just transfer information. Communication creates outcomes. It creates confidence or confusion, momentum or has trust or uncertainty, alignment or conflict. The words we use, the tone we bring, the clarity we provide all shape the experience people have with us. And whether we realize it or not, we are communicating all day long, even when we say nothing. There's a great quote from George Bernard Shaw that says, "The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place." And isn't that true? How many times have we thought, I already explained that. I thought everyone knew. I assumed we were on the same page. Meanwhile, the other person is thinking, I'm confused. I didn't understand. I wish somebody would have told me. And what's dangerous about poor communication is that it compounds. Small confusion becomes bigger confusion. Small misunderstanding becomes frustration, and frustration eventually becomes mistrust. That's why communication is not just a soft skill, it's a leadership skill, it's a relationship skill, and it's a performance skill. The people who drive the best results are usually not just the smartest people in the room, they're often the clearest communicators in the room. Because clarity creates confidence, and confidence creates movements. Think about the best leaders, the best teammates, the best business partners. Most of them have one thing in common. When they communicate with you, you leave knowing what's happening, what matters, what comes next. There's no guessing, there's no confusion, there are no mixed signals, just clarity. And clarity is powerful. Brene Brown said, "Clear is kind, unclear is unkind." And I love that quote because it challenges something a lot of people struggle with. Sometimes we avoid being direct because we think we're being nice. But unclear communication doesn't help people. It creates uncertainty, and uncertainty causes stress. Think about this in everyday business. How often do issues escalate simply because expectations weren't set early, someone waited too long to communicate, or people assumed instead of clarifying? Most conflict doesn't begin with bad intent. It begins with poor communication. And one of the biggest mistakes people make is this. They communicate once and they assume it was understood. But effective communication is rarely one conversation. It's reinforcement, it's follow up, it's confirmation. Great communicators don't just send messages, they make sure their messages are received clearly. Let me give you an example. Have you ever had someone explain something to you, and technically, yes, they said all of the right words, but you still walked away confused? And then you've probably also had the opposite happen, where someone explained something complicated to you, but it felt very simple. You leave thinking, wow, that actually makes sense. That's a skill. And that skill creates trust because people trust people who bring clarity. Now, here's what's important. Communication is not only about what you say, it's about what people hear. And that means effective communication requires empathy. You have to ask yourself, who am I speaking to? What matters to them? What do they need from this conversation? Because different people process information differently. Some people want the details. Some people want big picture. Some people need reassurance. And some people need directness. And one of the most powerful things you can do in communication is to tailor your message to the person receiving it. Dale Carnegie once said, talk to someone about themselves and they will listen for hours. Why? Because people want to feel understood, and communication becomes more effective when people feel seen, not managed. That's true with clients, that's true with partners, teams, families, everyone. People don't just remember the information you gave them, they remember how you feel, how you made them feel during the conversation. Now let's talk about another communication killer, assumption. Assumption quietly destroys alignment. We assume someone understood. We assume someone agreed. We assume someone knew. We assume someone was okay. But that assumption creates gaps, and gaps create mistakes. One of the best habits you can develop is simply asking better questions. Questions like, does this make sense? What questions do you have? How are you seeing this? What am I missing? Strong communicators don't communicate to impress. They communicate to connect. And here's the important truth. Timing matters in communication. What you say matters, but when you say it matters too. Great communicators address things early, not just because it's comfortable, but because clarity early prevents problems later. Silence creates stories. When communication disappears, people fill the gaps with assumptions, and they're usually negative ones. That's why proactive communication is one of the greatest trust builders in business. Even if the update is nothing has changed yet, that still creates confidence because people feel informed. Now let's talk about listening, because communication is not just speaking well, it's listening well. And honestly, most people listen to respond, not to understand. And you can feel the difference. When someone is truly listening to you, you feel valued, you feel heard, and that changes relationships. The best communicators ask questions, they stay curious, and they create space for people to speak honestly. And here's the irony. Some of the most powerful communication skill is silence, pausing, listening, allowing someone space to think. That can change the quality of a conversation. And I think one of the greatest opportunities all of us have is to become more intentional communicators, not reactive communicators, intentional ones. To ask ourselves, am I creating clarity? Am I creating confidence? Am I creating alignment? Or am I unintentionally creating confusion? Because communication shapes cultures, it shapes relationships, it shapes trust, and ultimately, it shapes results. The people who consistently win in business are often not the loudest people. They're the people who communicate with clarity, with consistency, with empathy, with confidence. And the good news is this: communication is a skill, which means it can improve. You can become a better listener. You can become a clearer speaker. You can become a more intentional leader. You can become a stronger connector. And when communication improves, everything improves. Relationships improves, teams improve, client experiences improve, results improve. So here's the challenge today. Before every important conversation, pause and ask yourself, what experience do I want this person to have after talking with me? Not just what information do I need to give, but how do I want them to feel? Clear, confident, supported, aligned. Because better communication drives results. Communication creates clarity, confidence, and connection. I'll leave you with this. Words are powerful. They can build trust. They can create momentum. They can strengthen relationships, or they can create confusion and distance. So today, slow down enough to communicate clearly, listen fully, clarify expectations, and lead conversations with intention. Because better communication doesn't just change conversations, it changes outcomes. Thank you so much for joining today. I hope you have a remarkable day.